Good evening, everybody. How are y'all doing today?
Okay.
Good? So my name is EggCosplays, and today I'm going to be doing a one-foot panel on how to build a budget cosplay.
I can't believe it because I talked to the guy at the front desk and he said no.
Okay, so I have been cosplaying since late 2018. I have 3 Best in Show awards as well as 5 others. My experience in pattern making, drafting, filmsmithing, sewing, and printing.
I'm Sabrina. My parents didn't know that the change was
Just because I was told I should have this.
Anyway,
Just because you have a low budget doesn't mean that your costume is going to look lesser for it. This one right here, on the far left, cost about $300 to make. The one directly next to it with the green hair, $11. Same thing here, these two, with the horns and then the red and yellow one, fairly expensive. The 2 on the other side of them, less than $20 each. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to get into is how to acquire patterns cheaply. So you can do one of 2 things. You can either buy your own or you can make them home. Buying it is easier, but that price can add up fairly quickly, and then to make it, it's cheaper, but it's a little bit more labor to put into it. Alright. And where do you buy patterns? So you can buy them online or in person. Big box stores like Joann's and Hobby Lobby do have patterns. Joann's does do a sale fairly frequently where you can get 10 patterns for $10. And the good thing is, don't use Hobby Lobby, but Hobby Lobby's coupons are valid at Joann's, which is great. Okay, as far as online, Etsy has a lot of patterns. A lot of them are for specific characters, which if you're looking for somebody that's kind of common, like Link and the Legend of Zelda, 100%, there's about 50 patterns on Etsy. However, because those are patterns that are made by another person or a company, they do tend to be a little bit more expensive. Amazon does have some patterns. Sometimes a really old one will pop up there. It's usually not cheap, but they do get some out-of-print ones from time to time. And then my favorite on the far end is Licala.co and their sister site Sewist.com. Okay, my personal favorite of the 2 names, Sewist.com. Sewist.com is a custom pattern generating website with thousands of patterns. And the cool thing about it is you can get super close to the garment that you're wanting to make minor alterations, and the patterns are all below $3. If you buy a bunch of patterns at the same time, the price of each one starts to drop, and I have seen the patterns go for as low as 45 cents. And the size of it generated goes all the way up to a 9XL. They also do carry pattern blocks for sleeves, dresses, bodices, and trousers, which I definitely recommend getting your hands on one of those because it makes making different patterns from a block is much easier than having to remake a new pattern every single time. As far as making patterns, there's a couple of different ways that you're able to do it. You can draft from a grid tutorial, which is help artists. You can modify an existing pattern, which is medium difficulty. I would recommend looking up how to do some of the alterations. If you look right here in this nightgown pattern, so it has the parts with the stripes that are going diagonal. That is where they've taken the pattern, cut up into it, and spread the pattern open to get more volume in the various parts of the garment. And then the easiest way to make your own pattern is to take a garment that you have, trace it, and then add your seam allowance around the outside. Making your own patterns is not 100% safe. You need to make a mock-up. You need to make a mock-up every time, but if you are using a custom pattern that you made yourself, definitely make one so you know how it's going to fit, because you do not want to cut into your final fabric and it not fit. I've done that before. That very closely happened with the shirt I have on right now, which is a disaster because vinyl fabric can be expensive. Moving on to fabric, you can get it either online or in person. Online is easier. So online it has its pros and cons. So some websites that I personally use are Fabric Wholesale Direct, Mood Fabrics, Side Fabrics, and Amazon. And I only use Amazon now that Fabric.com has been removed. Next to that, so except for Side Fabrics, they all do international shipping. And then UI is the way the website is laid out. Some of them are not great. Some of them are pretty good. With Fabric Wholesale Direct and Mood Fabrics, they do have more quantity-wise, and Mood Fabrics does have an archive of actual fashion patterns, and most of them are free if you sign up for their newsletter, if you would want to do that. Fabric Wholesale Direct is definitely the cheapest of the websites, but they do have a minimum amount that you need to buy before you can actually order off the site. For Side Fabrics, if you ever need scrap fabric or stuff to make mock-ups out of, Side Fabrics does sell remnant lots. So like the offcuts left over at the end of a bolt, they package them up and they send them to you, and they're very, very cheap. And then all of the stock that was on Fabric.com has been transferred to Amazon. There's some pros and cons though for buying online versus buying in person. If you buy in person, you do get to feel the fabric before you actually buy it. Definitely wash your hands if you are touching fabric folds. You're not the only person who's put their hands on them. It is faster to acquire fabric in person, and interfacing, for some strange reason, tends to be super, super cheap at the big box stores. Most of the time, if you go to a box store, the fabric has a upcharge on it because you're paying for that store to be open for the employees. Interfacing is rarely, if ever, that much higher than the factory price. The cons of buying in person, though, that fabric has been touched by many, many hands. I have gotten bolts of fabric from a store that were stained, and they don't always come out. Sometimes, if you are at a big box store, their variety isn't amazing. If you do happen to live in a city with a fashion district, though, don't worry about that. That's probably your best bet. I happen to live in a city that does not have one of those, and so my choices are a little bit more limited. And then free fabric. If you find out a fabric store in your area is closing, talk to them, because I managed to get my hands on 55 yards of a thick polyester my cloak that I have with me is actually made out of that. I have not gone through that entire chunk of fabric yet, and I will probably be using it for until the end of time. You can also use curtains and bed sheets for mock-ups. And the good thing about bed sheets and curtains is they're usually already pre-washed. You get a big area of fabric. One of my costumes, the one up here, the blue one on the far right-hand corner, is actually made out of the back side of a comforter that I didn't use anymore. And it's good to recycle fabric, because a lot of fabric is made these days out of plastic. And so if it gets thrown away, it's not going to break down the way an organic fabric would. So we don't want that to end up in landfills. Okay, so other websites that I have used or at least interacted with before to get fabric is fabricdirect.com. They have some interesting stuff from time to time. They actually carry an organza that is shiny, that does not look super cheap, and that can be very hard to find. Most of the shiny organza you find in a big box store is crinkle organza, and one wrong move and that's wrinkled forever, and it tends to look super, super cheap. Silk Baron has real silk. It is expensive, but it's real. They actually still carry the one type of silk that you can recognize immediately by its texture, which is going to be silk dupioni. Silk dupioni is actually a very wonderful fabric to work with. Big Z fabric has a lot of metallic lycra and mirror vinyl, and I've seen the gold vinyl you can buy off of their website. If you look in that mirror right there behind you, that is the reflection you're going to get off of that fabric. And then Etsy, the prices can be a little bit higher, but there are hidden gems. They do carry a lot of prints. Oops, sorry. They do carry a lot of prints from like China, and you can commission people through Etsy to make a custom print for a specific character. Like say you're going to cosplay, I don't know, Nezuko. You can have somebody make that pattern for you and print it. Now for buying the foam. I will say one thing though, I'm not a huge fan of Warblood. If you've ever worked with Warblood, it's a thermoplastic. It doesn't stand up to the heat here in Texas very well in the summer. And so if you're using the Warblood, expect whenever it's made out of to start to warp the moment it hits like an inch. So my go-to, however, is EVA foam. Here, the places where I get the foam from are TNT Cosplay, Joann's, because I live right by one, and then Amazon. TNT Cosplay, by and large, is my favorite. At the end of every year, they have a clearance sale on all of their defective items. And when I say defective, I mean the same level of defective that makes it so something cannot be sold on a store shelf. I got a 7-foot roll of 10mm EVA foam that had one nick taken out of the corner. And that was enough for it not to be sold on the regular website. I got it for $17. They also have the tools there. They have a bunch of different thicknesses of foam, which is wonderful. Joann's does carry the Yaya Han line of EVA foam, and if you can afford it, we do like supporting fellow cosplayers. That particular foam does often have a pattern already cut into it, and so if you want to do like a sci-fi thing or an armor or something that has like stone patterns on it, they do have something that is already cut that way. And then for Amazon, the 2mm foam is okay for details. You can get some pretty large pieces, and I really wouldn't use it for anything else. What they frequently call closed cell foam is actually open cell. And if you want to make an EVA foam armor, you cannot use open cell foam. It will collapse. You have a question?
Yes, I was something to add is that in Northeast San Antonio, there's a place called Rolling Rabbit Village. I don't think it's still there, I haven't been in years, but probably it's still there. They have these scraps coming. You get scraps of various kinds of foam, very cheap, including this real close cell foam.
Tell me more about that after. So a couple of quick notes about EVA foam is open versus closed, like I said, is super important. Closed cell, when you heat it up to seal it, it does not shrink nearly as much. When you are making something with EVA foam and you are going to paint it, you do have to heat seal it, because if you don't, foam is a very porous material, it will drink the paint. I know this because I've made that mistake before, and painting over something porous and getting the consistency of the color that you want does get kind of difficult, and you end up wasting money because you have to buy more paint. You can get foam from the hardware store. I don't really recommend it because the area that you get for the price is not as good if you go to like an actual cosplay shop. And the foam that you get there is the floor tiles. The fun fact about the floor tiles is they tend to give off toxic fumes if you heat them up too much. You should be wearing a respirator whenever you're using a heat gun on anything, but you definitely want to be careful with the floor tiles. If you are making a costume for a character that you're going to make platforms for under the shoes, those are fine. They're very sturdy and they wear out. You can just replace them super easily. But for anything else, because you have to sand the texture off when it's nighttime. And then the kind of the downside of using EVA foam is that there's a lot of wastage. What you can do to cut down on that is if you cut the remnants into little pieces and then use that to spread whatever glue you're using. That's a good way to do it, but it's going to end up getting thrown out. That is the one thing Warpla has over EVA foam is that there's very little waste because you can heat up whatever you have left and form it into something else. Okay. Number 4 is the tools. I am a firm believer in the idea that there are some things you really just should not skimp on. Tools and shoes are the two big things. I have found at the hard way that you spend a lot more money replacing cheap tools than you will if you just buy the better one right off the bat. Places to get tools, you can get them online, in person, at a hardware store, or in person at a craft store. The places that I tend to pick up tools from are going to be Harbor Freight. It's the cheapest. The tools aren't amazing, but they do have a bunch of coupons that come out like every week. And you can get like free knives, like cutting knives and flashlights. And they have some basic stuff. I used a Dremel from there, or a rotary cutter from there for a long time before I replaced it with an actual Dremel. Home Depot, more expensive, but they do tend to carry things like Black & Decker, DeWalt, those kinds of tools. If you're getting a drill to use for your cosplays, go with one of those two because they are pretty hardy. If you are getting a rotary cutter, go with the actual Dremel brand because the torque inside that machine is going to be a lot better than a discount one. You can, if you are near a Lowe's and a Home Depot, they have the same stuff, and you can always compare the pricing between the two and just pick whichever one is going to be more cost effective. Joann's has more specialized crafting tools. They carry like the entire line of Cricut tools, and you don't need a Cricut to use some of those tools. Cricut has very, very sharp blades. If you need some good cutting blades, that is one place to get them. Amazon has everything. Definitely double check the reviews, and my go-to for reviews on tools and cosplay anything is check for people who are not cosplayers using it. Because if more than just cosplayers are using it, I found a much higher chance of it not blowing up in your face. And then believe it or not, the dollar store has hot glue. Always great to pinch. Okay, other materials that you're going to run into, wigs, shoes, makeup, and jewelry. Okay, so I actually buy all my wigs from Amazon. This wig is from Amazon. I usually go for the $20 to $50 range. And again, I always check the reviews for people who are not cosplayers using a wig, because if somebody's going to use that wig on a day-to-day basis, it's probably going to stand up to whatever abuse you put it through. And I teased the heck out of this thing on 4 different occasions. I've only had one wig not be what was in the picture. And there is a store on Amazon, it's called Map of Beauty. Their wigs are not amazing. However, if you are cosplaying a character that happens to have more than one hair color, I recommend grabbing some Map of Beauty wigs to harvest the wets because they're cheap. Like a Map of Beauty wig, 120 centimeter, which is like a 24-inch wig from Map of Beauty is like $10. They do tend to tangle, but if you're just harvesting wefts, that's not that big of an issue. As far as shoes go, however, comfort and quality are far more important than price. It's better to spend, like I said, on good, sturdy shoes that you can walk in. Don't be me and wear 4-inch heels for an 8-hour convention. And you can always make boot covers to cover the shoes that you're wearing, so that you can use more than one. You can use the shoes for more than one costume, or even just have the shoes to wear. As far as makeup goes, you can get cheap makeup, but you need to be really, really careful. Amazon does have some really good cheap eyeshadow palettes. I found one with 120 colors on it for $25. I bought it. It's great. It's the most pigmented eyeshadow palette I have ever purchased. And I have a couple of the more expensive ones. Don't skimp on makeup brushes because you want those things to deposit the color the way they're supposed to and not immediately start shedding off all the bristles. But when it comes to things like foundation or primer, definitely go with something that's more recognized. I have gotten chemical burns from cheap foundation before. It is not fun. I don't recommend it. And if you do ever talk to a dermatologist and they tell you what makeup you should be wearing, don't deviate from that. And then jewelry. This is coming from somebody who has been in contests and who has judged contests. They don't really look at the jewelry that hard. It's called the 5-foot rule. If you can pass it off at 5 feet, you are pretty much golden. And a lot of jewelry that pops up in anime doesn't exactly follow the laws of physics, but you can get pretty damn close just Frankensteining different jewelry together. I have done that before. Gate trims, notions, and other things. So you can get pretty nice trims on Etsy, Amazon, and AliExpress. Yes, AliExpress. I don't recommend getting trims from big box stores because they don't really carry anything that nice, especially lace. What they do tend to carry is super, super scratchy, and it tends to fall apart. I buy lace off of AliExpress all the time, and I have never actually been burned by anything I've been sent. It's all been really, really nice because these AliExpress stores tend to somehow have access to the factories where these trims are being made in the first place. Amazon actually does have a couple of stores that do sell very nice crocheted cotton lace, which I'm a big fan of because it's an organic material, it looks nice, it won't scratch you super bad. Notions, I hoard those. So I buy thread, zippers, pins, chalk, and other things like that in bulk so that I have them, because nothing says wonderful like getting 70% of the way through a costume and realizing I don't have the right zipper. This convention is in 2 days. Will Amazon deliver in time? Probably not. Every time, always late zippers. So I just keep a hoard of them. If you are ever taking apart an old garment and it has a good metal zipper, keep the zipper. Most new zippers are plastic. They break super easily. The metal ones, especially the metal ones they put on like prom and wedding dresses, those are indispensable. Pins, you will go through pins. They don't last that long. Every time you put that pin through fabric, it's going to dull the end of it, and eventually it'll tear the fabric as opposed to just sliding between the fibers like you want it to. Same thing goes with the sewing machine needle. You need to change that out every 2 or so bobbins. Like when you run out of thread that goes in the bottom of the machine, twice. Change that needle because you can't see it. If you put that thing under a microscope, it has bent upward and it will start to tear the fabric. And if you are using a super expensive fabric or a stretch fabric or something that you really don't want to damage, or something like charmeuse, which will show runs in it super easily, you want a sharp needle. And then things like heat transfer vinyl, rhinestones, gems, also can be bought in bulk. I prefer to buy my heat transfer vinyl, kind of like off-brand from Amazon. Cricut has nice vinyl, but I feel like it's way too expensive. I can get a 30-foot roll of heat transfer vinyl that works just fine off of Amazon for less than what I could buy a 24-inch roll off from Cricut. So at that point, if you're looking for something super, super, super specific, or if it has some kind of like licensed characters on it, Cricut would be the one to actually carry it, because they have made deals with just about everything. And the good thing about the Cricut machines, whether or not you have one, if you do, they are compatible with the off-brand blades. Any questions?
I was mentioning as a place to find stuff. Thrift stores,
Yes.
especially in a place where they have older fabrics. Sometimes you'll have some nice fabric in the sections for bed sheets and stuff. Sometimes all the stuff that's got good fabric on it. Obviously, that can be really cheap, especially when you know about sale day.
I believe there is a thrift store here in Texas that starts out at $1 at the beginning of the week, and by the end of the week, it is 25 cents for everything. And it's a massive warehouse.
We have in this area is the salvage ones. There's one in South Austin. There's one in East San Antonio. They basically charge by the band.
Ooh.
And it's really great for things that are kind of very interestingly common to find. But yeah, if you get fabric, it's like it depends where you go. I think it's still $159, $169 Austin. Same time as the more expensive. The point is that you get to go through the bins and find stuff, and it's there. You know what it is.
That's a super good point. If you guys are ever cosplaying a character who happens to, I know I didn't talk about buying costumes. Effectively, buying a costume is usually cheaper than making it, unless you already have the materials on hand. This is not the cheapest hobby, I'm sure we all know. But if you are cosplaying a character, like say, Legoshi from Beastars, or any of the Chainsaw Man characters, that's one that's current, they're wearing normal clothing. Don't buy the cosplay. You just buy the normal clothes. You will drop $100 on that Legoshi costume when you can just buy the vest, the shirt, and the pants for like half of that. And you'll get more wear out of those garments because they're meant to actually be worn, as opposed to a costume that isn't really meant to last all that
Made out of big material.
Usually they're usually they're made out of a very thin polyester that does break down really quickly. And they're usually not sewn super well either.
We're also in Texas, we want because it means
Yes.
having yourself in the cost of tape.
Right, that's why for this costume I have on right now, I could not avoid using a synthetic fabric for the top because of the way it fits the character. But my pants are 100% cotton, which is wonderful because, as you can see, I have long sleeves, long pants, and cape.
So it should be that it doesn't matter as much.
Any other questions? You can ask about contests too. I'll answer that. Does anybody have any cosplays or anything they're making that they want to ask about?
That's an adult, but somebody had their cash and maybe lying and I'm trying to find a little nicer vest kind of jacket kind of thing, like this big jacket kind of thing, that'd be nice on the back page jacket. And some inspiration from the Lakers. The nice big sleeves with a tiny cuffs. That's the thing, I like to take inspiration from everybody. Your earrings on a hat. Well, that's from Chicago. Things like that. They're not ladies.
And I'm a firm believer in the fact that sewing is a very important skill to have. Even if you don't have a machine, I recommend picking up hand sewing at least. Purely because you save so much money by fixing your stuff than you do just buying new things.
The thing about that jacket is, I'm planning on, I have some development of course, but I have some other second-hand stuff that I like to use in the liner, and I'm realizing that if I start by making one in the cotton, jungle cotton stuff, the bedsheet stuff, then I leave it, we're gonna pattern right. Then I can make the liner, put it together, and then you make the jacket after having made it at least twice before. From the same pattern, just put it together where it's the same jacket inside and out.
Is your jacket fitted or not?
Or it'll be nice and loose.
Nice and loose, okay.
Yeah.
That is the one thing with the super silky lining for jackets. If they are fitted, don't do a cotton lining. Definitely not this. You can do with the main part, but in the sleeves, not the silky ones, because that's the line.
It's just like if it's Velcro, where if it's too warm, I can. That's
That is smart. That is really smart. And if it gets too cold, you can put a different lining
Trying
in
to
it.
see if I can just remove my plan was and realize more polish goes in that.
Collars are my least favorite.
Well, that's the other thing
pattern.
about things at thrift stores. We find regular clothing that's roughly the design you want, and then you take it apart. And you know what it's going what the curves are that when they're wrapped around, how they have to form to from straight lines to make it straight.
I like it super heavy. So anybody else have any other questions or cosplays they want to talk about?
It's like I came in there like my costume and I apologize, but I do have a question. Getting into stitching fabrics, enough to where I might try to do origami with it. Have you ever worked on stitching a fabric that much before?
So yes and no. In terms of stiffening a fabric, the most that I've done is this hat, which is a it has a paperboard base and with velvet put on top of it. I do know that there is a type of glue that they sell that is used in the process of making buckram. And that does, and so do you know what buckram is? So buckram is the material that is usually used in hats. It's similar to interfacing. If you've ever seen like a bonnet with the big brim, that's usually what's put in there to support the bonnet because it's lightweight. You can stitch through it really easily. And a lot of Middle Ages era, the really structured garments that they have that don't look like they should be that structured, but they are, frequently they are lining it with buckram because it's going to hold its shape. Buckram folds like paper. The glue itself, I know there is a modern way to make the glue, and there is a actual traditional way to do it. I'm unsure of the process on either one. I do know, however, that when you are trying to stiffen foam, you can use watered down wood glue very easily.
No, just a lock on it.
Buckram, BUCK, RAM.
And then my next question is I'm trying to think about like what kind of fabrics go with big cotton, but I feel that it isn't that heavy. Somebody suggested like a poly
Dupioni?
yes, thank you.
So the only Dupioni I've ever actually used has been silk Dupioni, which is fairly, well, because it's silk, it's fairly heavy. You can get away with the broadcloth. They make a lightweight broadcloth that I use it for mock-ups. It's that super thin cottony material that they have at Joann's. It's usually labeled as quilting cotton. Because quilting cotton and garment cotton are not exactly the same thing. Quilting cotton is thinner. Garment weight cotton is a heavier fabric because it is for clothing, which has to take a lot more wind and air than a quilt does. And anytime you do get fabric, though, regardless of where you're getting it from, pre-wash it, because the reason it sits so nicely on those bolts is because it has sizing put in there, and you want to wash that out, because if you don't, your garment is A, not going to hang the way you think it's going to hang, and it can shrink weirdly. Um, say when I was in high school sewing, I didn't pre-wash the fabric and fitted garment, not pre-washed fabric, not great. Any other questions?
Other thing is about living things to have some form that the gravity wouldn't allow with sometimes is pillows of fiber film.
Yes.
And then you just stay there.
I actually use not fiber fill, but I take a little hand towel because I wear berets somewhat frequently, and to get them to stand up like they do in the cute magazine photos, I do roll up a hand towel and put it in the brim, and that does get it to stand up. For things like cosplay as well, if you're trying to get gravity defying stuff, it's hard to go wrong with armature wire. Let me go back to the front of this.
This has a wiring that's blend.
So if you look at this one right here, these rolls, you can kind of see that they're not actually up against the skin of my arm. That's braided wire, and that's how it's holding that shape. It's not the thickest wire, but I wanted to be able to.
You braided the wire?
I braided
Okay.
like 18 gauge wire because I couldn't get thick enough. So this braided wire that is zigzag sewn down to the edge, and then very carefully I took bias tape and covered the raw edges. That is the one thing about adding wire to a cosplay when you're sewing it. I would recommend hand sewing it. But if you're like me and your hands cramp up super easily and you want to use a machine, you can, but do go slowly. I don't know why machines have that highest speed setting when you're not supposed to use it. It's very bad for the machinery. And if you hit a wire at high speed, I have seen people take injuries to the face from the needle shattering and shooting out. That's why you shouldn't sew over pins, even though everybody sews over pins. Just go slowly. Because you can also damage the part of the machine that actually sinks the needle down if you hit that pin or you hit the wire. And then you have to have your machine service, which is never fun.
You ever used a horse braid?
Horse braid hair?
Yeah, horse braid hair.
Horsehair braid? Yes.
Yeah. You ever use that for structural besides on the hem?
I came into possession of a large quantity of fabric and notions, and I did use horsehair braid for part of a shirt to stabilize an applique that I had made. I do not have a picture of that costume though. It is this character right here. He's somehow from a Hunter x Hunter, if you've ever seen it. His outfit in the election arc his shirt is more gravity defying in that arc than normal. And I didn't want to stabilize those appliques because of what I made the top out of. I made out of charmeuse, and you need to stabilize charmeuse if you have anything attached to it, because it doesn't like to cooperate. It can be a very loosely woven fabric, which also means it frays so much. But yes, it helped. It's kind of stopped the appliques from sliding around. But other than that, I haven't used it. I've used it on hems before. I think you could possibly use it on a sleeve if you are doing a character that has some of those crazy gravity-defying sleeves. I've seen like Genshin Impact is the motherload of crazy designs. I've seen a skin for a character from that game that has these wavy sleeves, and I would think horsehair braid would be the way to do that. But I will not touch a Genshin cosplay with a 10-foot pole because that is a lot. Any other questions? Yes.
So it's like taking three wires and braiding together?
Yeah.
Because I guess when you do that, you can make it flatten out into a little strip, which goes under a hem or something, yeah. Okay, that's a new trick to learn.
I tend to do things like that whenever I can't get something that is the right
One wire
size.
just does whatever it wants.
Yes. 3 is far more And that way, if one of the wires snaps, because even though it is flexible, you can still stress it out too much. And if it's braided, you still have two more supporting wires. One, the wire's not going to slip in place. And two, it's not going to start crunching at a funny angle. Did you have a question?
Actually, I'm getting into working with some instances also the implement fabric. So my thought was I see people use it tool first and then attach it as an applique to the garment. My thought was also maybe actually using the fabric that's right after instead. And I was wondering what your thoughts were on it. If he does that, or if I should actually underneath the fabric itself as an embroider, or
Depends on the fabric. If you were working with a very slidey, silky fabric, I would say put something under it regardless. When I work with any kind of satin or organza, I will sew it over parchment paper because organza hates existing. It will move and it's awful. When it comes to making appliques though, most of the time they are beaded onto a transparent mesh netting. And the practical reason that they do that is if that garment has to be altered or cleaned in a way that that applique has to be removed, if it's on a netting, you can pull the whole applique off, do whatever needs to be done to the garment, and just stick it back on. If you bead it into the garment, that's not going to come off that easily. And there also is depending on where you put the beading, although I don't think I've ever seen beading on a part of a garment that takes a lot of stress, except maybe the waist seam, because you'll see beaded waists. Every time you put that needle through the fabric, you run a very high chance of severing one of the threads that it's woven out of. And if you put too much of that on your main fabric and you move wrong, you could tear it. You can trim that next. You can actually get an applique onto a netting that is very similar in color to what the fabric you're going to use. Or you can just trim it super close. Any other questions? So this is the first time I've done this panel. Yeah, I don't have slides. Anybody? Yes. Any advice for beginners? Are you wanting to buy or are you wanting to make?
oh,
So, how's your experience with sewing?
beginner.
Beginner? So I talked about this website. So sewist.com is a website that generates patterns. The way it works is it has a base for a lot of things, and you can put collar, you can make shirts, jumpsuits, pants. It's great for pants because pants are a lightweight. Skirts. They have clothes for they do patterns for men, women, children, infants even. They're still, and they add stuff all the time, and they have a sister site called Lacala. Lacala has ones that are a little bit more dressed up, and again, I have never seen Lacala's price go over $5, which is much better than paying $10 at Joann's for a pattern for a fairly regular garment. Sewist.com does have its limitations. You can't ornament it too much, but you can get close. Are you familiar with Hatsune Miku? She's the girl with the long green pigtails, the singer. So you can get extremely close. She's a very interesting cut on the arm side of her shirt. You can get real close with Sewist.com. And I think it's good for beginners because it's fairly simple. The one thing it doesn't tell you is the yardage of fabric you need, but if you have ever used a regular commercial pattern, you can kind of base it off of that. And you just kind of get used to how much fabric you would need to cut in a body. With Sewist.com, the cool thing is they don't upcharge for custom sizing. The patterns can be as low as 45 cents. They do a sweepstakes that everybody with an account on the website is automatically entered in, where if you win, you get 5 free patterns of your choosing. And they actually go all the way to a 9XL in letter sizing, and you can actually, they have on the sidebar, I should have put a screenshot of the website, they have a slot where you can put in your actual measurements. The one thing about those, if you do a character with a really short top, they don't have above the waist, they don't have waist higher crop tops yet, but you can actually, it's not that hard to raise a straight line. And then what's the other? Definitely though, if you're getting custom patterns off of like, one thing with Sewers.com, very straightforward patterns. Clearly labeled, the only thing is you have to cut it out from a PDF file, and sometimes a printer might warp it. On the patterns though, there's always a page that has a square, and when you print that out, you can measure that with a ruler to make sure that your printer is actually calibrated correctly. That way it comes out the right size. And also pay attention to when they say, when you click a button that says this is for knit fabrics only, they mean it. You cannot use a non-stretch fabric on a pattern built for a stretch fabric. I have tried that, it does not work well. Because a pattern meant for a stretch fabric is already cut smaller to accommodate for the stretch of the fabric. If you go on to like Etsy, they have patterns for specific characters. Like I said, Link from the Legend of Zelda, there's a Etsy shop that has all the Demon Slayer ones. There's Zelda, Sophie Hatter, House Moving Castle, all of it. You can find it. They tend to tell you the difficulty level of the pattern. And if you are just starting out, I would recommend not going higher than intermediate. Because when they say something's a difficult pattern, they mean it's a difficult pattern. And then, like I said, Joann's has a lot of patterns. Take advantage of their $1 pattern sale. Because you can get a bunch of stuff. Because they don't limit which ones you can put. Which it's great if you want to get something that's licensed. I got the 2015 Cinderella dress pattern for $1. It is normally $25. I have not used it yet, but I plan to. Other things for beginners. Wigs. Wigs are kind of a thing I see with beginners that they tend to, I want to say mess up, but where you get your wig can affect how it turns out. You can buy from Arda. Arda's not cheap. They tend to be constantly on back order, but they're high quality. This wig is actually from Amazon. It was, I believe, $40, but it's a lot of hair. You can see how much hair it has. My wig back here, right here for this Metaton, the pink wefts right here, I did buy a $4 wig, and I salvaged the wefts off of it. This is actually 2 fairly cheap wigs sewn together. And I would also recommend when you get into wig styling, watch how actual hair is styled as a basis and then move into wig styling. Because wig styling can be kind of weird. You are working with a synthetic material, so essentially this is plastic and it will behave like fabric. So if you burn this, it stays that way. And you do heat style wigs, like these little spikes are teased and they're sprayed, and then I hit it with a hairdryer, and that is how it stays in this position. You can also get a crimper. I'm not the biggest fan of really crimped wigs because crimpers leave a very noticeable texture to the wig hairs. As far as things like makeup, if you'll take a picture of these are the fabric websites that I use. Lood also has a lot of interesting novelty stuff. They had a gold and silver braided metallic trim, and I've never ever seen it in another place. And then Fabric Wholesale Direct has fur for fairly low prices. Fur is usually pretty expensive. Okay. And then things like shoes, don't skip on shoes ever. That's a bad idea. If a character has really crazy shoes, this is coming from somebody who competes. The judges will value practicality over accuracy. If you are wearing a shoe that breaks on you, that's going to look bad. If you're wearing a shoe that's practical, that's fine. Makeup, they don't look super close at jewelry, unless it's like something super iconic to the character. And then makeup, I said earlier, I bought a 120 color eyeshadow palette from Amazon for $25. It's wonderful. It has more pigment than some of the, it has more, I have a red wand palette that is not even remotely as good as this one. And then don't skip on makeup brushes. Wash your makeup brushes every time you use them. Do not buy cheap foundation. I think I maybe have time for one more question.
I need basic look on story too, so I actually have a sort of encyclopedic reference to the various things involved in hand sewing and machine sewing.
Yes, definitely look up hand sewing and machine sewing, because when you get to your more complicated garments, there are things you cannot do with a machine. Like we hem on these pants. Mind you, these pant legs are huge. Each panel, there's 4 of them, are 4 feet wide. So each pant leg is 8 feet in circumference. I had to hand hem that. Because a machine would have distorted the way the fabric rolled into itself for a rolled hem. And I also recommend learning the hand sewing technique to put in zippers, because putting in zippers with a machine is a little nightmare. And I can tell you, getting somebody with as much experience as I have, sleeves are evil. Did you know that sleeves on the front and the back are not the same curve? Because they're not. The back curve is different because of the way the shoulder is actually positioned. I believe the back curve is actually greater than the one on the front. And they don't tell you which side is which on parachute patterns.
That's pretty big of an evil tunic. In this case, it's
Yeah.
straight out Delaware.
Any other questions? You good? Are we good on time? It is 4:59. I have 1 minute. How about we get a picture? Oh, how about we get a picture of everybody? How's that sound? Well, thank you guys so much for being a great audience. This is the first time I've ever done a panel. I appreciate the questions. Have a wonderful night, okay?